friends. Welcome to this Thursday morning Deeper Dive Live. We are live in the building with the livest live audience in all of Tampa Bay. Give it up for them. Give it up for yourselves. Make some noise. Yes. You know, the Deeper Dive gives us the opportunity to attend to the things that God has said to us. We've determined to be people who are most blessed, and we're so grateful that you are here with us this Thursday morning. You're not on the chat by yourself. Shout out the people who are in the chat with you. Drop a good morning or a heart emoji or something like that. Share some love in the chat. We appreciate you being here with us this morning. Today, as we continue in our Family Matters sermon series, many of you joined us last night as we, Wednesdays are valuable Wednesdays. Last night, we watched a panel of men from Pastor Brian, our senior pastor, Pastor Benjamin, pastor of our Wesley Chapel campus, myself, Pastor Greg, our online pastor, he does so many things, and Pastor Gamage, VUR pastor, right? All of us shared from our perspective things pertinent to our family and family dynamics. And surrounding or stemming from the theme of understanding the urgency of the times that we live in, right? And so today what we did, we pulled a few clips from last night's Valuable Wednesday, and we're just going to dive deeper into a few points. And the point of it is, the purpose is that you be stirred up enough to attend to the things that God is saying to us in this time so that you and your families are most blessed. That sound good? Yeah. All right. So we're going to start with just a clip of some statements that Pastor Brian made regarding just the urgency that we should all experience, we should all feel as it relates to the assignment that God has given us in leading our families, and the urgency that's inherent in the gospel that's been passed down to us. So let's see the first clip.
They are yielding. And we have a generation who hasn't learned how to yield to the voice of God. Why? Because they believe that they're living in a time where there's space and time. They don't understand the urgency of the attack.
Yes. And too often today, we lose sight of the urgency of the times that we live in. Just the popular presentation of the gospel that many of us hear and have received today presents the gospel in a way that we leave feeling like we have time and space. We have time to get it right. We have time to work on, whatever needs to be worked on, and we have space because, God and Jesus are going to receive us the way that we are. And a lot of that thinking has caused us to put off things that need to be done right now. And today we are living amongst a generation of people who kind of operate with that mindset, when really, when we look at the gospel that's been given to us, when we look at the Bible from the beginning to the end, there remains this constant sense of urgency, like things that need to be adjusted, things that need to be finalized, things that need to be done because time is sensitive. I mean, even when we think about it, when we think about Jesus had a 3-year-long earthly 30 years on earth, but really we see his ministry in operation for 3 years. And he constantly operated knowing or being aware of, listen, I only have the time that I have. We don't have to necessarily measure it with the specific length, days, months, or years, but all of us need to understand that we only have the time that we have, no matter what that is. We only have the time that we have with our children. We only have the time that we have on this earth. And there's an assignment, there's a work that we've been given to do that has to be done, right? So we don't want to, I think one reason for this is we kind of lose. I got an audience right here. I know I'm looking at the virtual audience that's watching, but y'all here too, right? So y'all can talk back to me, right? So I think what happens is too often we lose sight of what wins and losses are. right? As we live this life, we live this grace life, we live the life that's been gifted to us. Too often we lose sight of what wins and losses look like. And in today's society, most of the time, wins and losses are counted in terms of social status and clout, like what I have, my influence, what I've been able to do, how many people are following me, things like that. Like if I'm doing it in that way, that's a win. And then too often, even as parents, we count wins based on how well our children are doing. Like, did they get into the school? Did they graduate? Did they get the good job? And we measure ourselves by those type of successes, right? And I mean, in some way, in a way that relates to this world and society, those are pluses. But when we talk about the kingdom and our assignment, right, we'd be really shallow to think that a win is my kid got into a certain school, right? And I think one of the reasons that we lose sight of the urgency of this time is because we lose sight of what a real win or what a real L, a loss, looks like compared to, right, if we reflect back on Big Mama's house, right? Big Mama, we today's society might consider it an L that all Big Mama had was her front porch and her kitchen pots and pans. But we lose sight that Big Mama also was able to pass on values and standards that allowed for her children and even their children to live a better life. Like, as far as the kingdom is concerned, that's a W. Because when it relates to godly things, like the assignment that we have, the game that we're playing is, were we able to pass on kingdom standards? Were we able to raise a kingdom standard? Were we able to pass on godly values? Like, that's the game that we play. And a W is, or win is, when we are able to pass on these values and these standards, right? So when we're clear about what the assignment actually is, I think that inherent in that clarity is the urgency that comes along with it. When I understand that I only have today in order to teach my child a godly value and to raise a kingdom standard in their lives, then along with that understanding comes the urgency for me to do my job, right? And with that, we could see that in a way that causes us to be anxious or overly pressured. Like, man, that's a big task. Like, I have to teach my kid godly a godly way or raise a kingdom standard. And some of us look at that and look at that in a way that causes us to feel the pressure or the anxiety of having to carry such an important task. I mean, the assignment that we have to give our kids some spiritual foundation. I mean, we have a job to give them something that's going to affect their eternity, right? There's a way that you can look at that that causes you to feel the pressure and the anxiety of it, right? But I think the relief from that, based on the conversation that we had in the men's panel, the relief from that is realizing that you are never assigned to do this on your own and to keep yourself in a proper position, right? If I take it on as my responsibility, then I could feel the pressure of having to do such a great job or great assignment in teaching them what they need for their spiritual benefit. But when I look at this through the perspective that, no, this is God's work, they are God's children, then I can, something that came up in the next clip that we're going to watch, then I can put myself and keep myself in a position as a guide and not a dictator. I think that's the challenge that some even men of the church or godly men and women, parents, get into, is like walking the thin line between being a guide or a dictator. Like, often the first inclination is to dictate to them how they're supposed to live this life, our children, how our children are supposed to live this life, versus being a guide and guiding them through this life, right? So let's watch this clip. This is Pastor Benjamin talking about the difference between being or what it looks like to be a guide, a guide.
Has the desire to be that person in their family's life, many of them have no model. And because they don't have a model, they end up doing things like talking too much and not listening.
So they can't guide their children because they can't guide the child because they're not listening to what the feedback they're getting.
Yep. Yeah. Um, you know, I think, and y'all in the room, right? Y'all can holler back at me. You can let me know in the chat. But I believe that no matter where we are in life, all of us should have models. No matter if you're just beginning, I encourage couples in premarital counseling. Like the next thing, like your homework assignment is to find some models. You need a model marriage, and not just one, but you need to find a couple that's just married. You need to find a couple that's been married a few years. You need to find a couple that's been married a long time and use those as the models for your marriage. Every leader should have a leader. Every leader should have a model for their leadership. Every ministry should have a model for their ministry. No matter where we are in our lives, I would hope that even at the age of 70, I hope I'm looking at a 90-year-old and figuring out how I'm supposed to be doing this. Right? We should all have models, godly models, to glean from. And when it comes to our parenting, I guarantee that God has placed another family in your viewpoint that you can look over and see and glean from how they do what they do as it relates to leading their families. Um, I think that perspective would keep us in a position where we are guides and not dictators. There's another part of the conversation from last night where Pastor Benjamin talks about how even in godly houses where you have parents who are in church, you have a father that's in church and they're working on raising their children the right way. We have cases where even though daddy was a man of God, the children grow up and they don't want to have anything to do with the presentation of godliness that they saw in their house, right? How does that happen? I think that it happens when parents leave the position of guides, understanding that, man, this is God's work, and they take possession of it like, no, this is my work, like this is my assignment. And we try to shape and form or conform families in our image instead of God's image. Whenever we find ourselves taking possession like that, we will stumble, right? Because the truth is that no person belongs to another person. All of us are God's people, his creation. He has a plan and a purpose for our lives. So we do have to submit our leadership. We have to submit our parenting. We have to submit our influence to him so that we are participating with him to get people, even the people in our house, to the place that he wants them to be, not the places that we've determined for them to be. So if you're leading a house, you're leading a family, seek out a model. I think that's practical wisdom. Who can you model your leadership after? Pray that God point out to you individuals that you can model your leadership after, no matter what it is that you're doing, no matter what level of expertise you may feel that you have. You should have models for what you do. Amen. Let's look at this last clip. In this last clip, this is Pastor Benjamin again, and again, we're in this. We're going to pull out more conversation about what what a loss looks like in the kingdom. Okay. Next.
Well, it looks like you're giving ground,
Yep.
but your strategy is really
Yep.
progressing.
Yep.
Yeah.
In giving ground, you're actually invoking a strategy that's going to get you to W.
Correct.
That's right. That's right.
When
That's a good one. It was a short one, but that's a good one, right? And in the background, you hear Pastor Gamage co-signing on what Pastor Benjamin is saying, and basically he's talking about he's sharing something that I think all of us have experienced. Whoever, I mean, if you're attending to relationships and where you feel you have a responsibility to lead or guide, right? I mean, you can let me know if you relate to come into that moment where you feel like you're about to take an L. Like I don't see how this is gonna get me to where I think we need to be, but the conditions and the circumstances here, I'm gonna have to take a back seat and allow what happens to happen, or I'm gonna have to give some advice that I don't necessarily believe is gonna get us to the W, but I feel so compelled just to tell you this. Like based on where we are, this is what I need to give you. I think many of us who are actively guiding and leading other people, we get to a place where we're challenged with giving counsel that feels like we're about to lose, right? And I think even in many parents, you get to that point where you're working with your child, and you get to that point where it's like, here's a point that I'm going to have to release, right? How many of us at different ages? And sometimes I know we think about, ideally that the society says that, well, when they get 18, when they turn 18, that's when we release them. But I think that there are many godly parents who, you may have felt that feeling at 16. You may have felt that compelling, that unction to back up a little bit at 14, at 12, depending upon the situation, right? And the challenge in those moments is you feel like the vulnerability that comes with it may make you think that you're about to lose. But really, what we know and what our spirits continue to encourage us is that, wow, I am releasing this to God, and now it's in His hands, and I get to see Him do what only He can do. So again, we have to be clear on how we define wins and losses, right? And there are moments where we have to, quote unquote, take an L in order for the real win to be gained in the end. You know, personally, I have two daughters, two beautiful daughters who remind me of how beautiful they are every day, right? Two beautiful daughters. Our oldest is 20, will be 20 this year. And she didn't grow up in our house, right? We had shared, in her mother and I shared custody, shared parenting responsibilities from a distance over the 20 years, right? And there were moments, well, a particular moment in just hearing from God on how to navigate this relationship in order to get it to where I believed He wanted it. I counted as grace that I even early understood that she's been gifted to me, but I'm a steward. She belongs to God. And so just by His grace, I'm thankful that we're able to maintain that type of perspective. But there were moments over the years where it was like, man, that decision feels like in other people's eyes, this is a loss. Like, that's a L, man. What are you talking about, right? But being able to maintain a larger, or to just for a point of reference, a God's perspective, that this is God's child. He has a desire to have a relationship with her, and He's going to do a work beyond the length of my arms, right? I can't reach into what He's going to do. Trusting, becoming vulnerable in those moments and trusting what He can do, trusting what God can do, turns what others would say as L's into W's. Like, we have to remember that the ultimate goal, as difficult as it may be, especially when we factor in society's standard and culture's standard, and some of us, our family standard, like, the goal is not high school diploma. The ultimate goal is not college degree. The ultimate goal is not a good job, a house, 2 kids, married, and a picket white fence, and a dog. Like, that's not the goal. The ultimate goal is that this person is connected to their creator and they have a kingdom assignment. Like, that is the work that we've been trusted with. And in order to do that spiritual work, it's beyond me. It's beyond you. I have to tap into and be connected to the mind of God. I have to get his counsel. And through that, there are moments we'll get to places where I can't see around this corner. I can't see over this mountain. I'm in the valley and I can't see what's next. But I have to trust that he does. He sees the whole plan. He knows how to navigate me as well as them to get us all to where he wants to be. And yes, it's a moment of vulnerability. It's a moment of trust. But we know, many of us who've made it to the other side of those moments, we know that it's all worth it, right? So again, one thing that I think is important for those of you who are listening, and you may be at the beginning of that journey, you may be at the start of those type of feelings. I trust that God has put others in your life who have already made it to the other side. And I encourage you to connect, link up with those families so that you can gain their perspective and the wisdom that they've gained, the wisdom that they've, in some cases, paid for through many bad decisions. You can learn some lessons from what other people have paid for, right? And we'll all be most blessed as we attend to the word that way. So we want to encourage you, continue, go back and listen to the men's panel. It was good. The men had something to say. Today is Thursday. We're looking into the weekend. It's going to be a good one as we continue the Family Matters sermon series. There's plenty more to come. There's some fun headed your way as we do this. As you go through this day, go through it knowing that we love you. God loves you. Keep attending and keep being most blessed. We'll see you soon.